Hello OTCers and welcome to Villa Park. Aren't we two lucky boys, JJ? We have seen one of the Champions League games of the season. I don't think we've done a chat after a game as good as that all season, because I guess like 25 minutes in, you're thinking, oh, this is a bit of a shame. You were hoping for them to ride the crest of that Villa Park atmosphere. Didn't quite happen. And then all of a sudden, bang, bang, in the second half, and the roof's coming off.
Exactly. I mean, a big talking point. Was it a master class from Unai Emery at the very beginning of the game to switch the anthem from the Champions League anthem to the Europa League one? Well, we'll never know, but regardless of whether that was all part of the plan all along from Unai Emery, it was an incredible turnaround. I'm fortunate enough to say that's not my first 3-2 Villa win. Felt a heart coming back from 2-0 down, but I have to say I think it was the most unexpected. Certainly sort of after that first 25 minutes, as you said, you came up to me at half-time and sort of asked how I felt, and I was disappointed with the way that sort of Villa had handled the first 45 minutes in general. Obviously the sort of 5 minutes or so going into half-time, a bit better, got the goal to get themselves back into the game. But suddenly the way that they managed to turn it around at the beginning of the second half and gave themselves the best part of half an hour to go and chase that goal, which would have taken it to extra time, possibly penalties. Obviously we know that they didn't get it in the end, but I think Villa can come away from this game, from this performance, with their heads held high. It's, really is, it was worthy of the atmosphere that was built up by the fans.
Yeah, well, look, we'll come back to what it means for Villa and possible future participations in the Champions League, because I'm certainly left with the feeling that them not being in the Champions League, and I feel confident they'll make it through the Premier League, but I would be disappointed if they didn't make it for next season, given how much they've given to this season's competition. But I mean, that was the most Champions League near comeback ever, because it happened in such flurries, didn't it? Such flurries of momentum, the way it switched around, because they were looking super comfortable at 2-0 PSG. All of a sudden, they're a little bit careless on the ball, and Villa pull a goal back. Then they're comfy again, and it looks all fine. Then John McGinn gets stuck in, and that flurry of chances, like you're saying, you're expecting in the last 20 minutes or so there to be a head of steam, that pressure to come, all those chances to come. And of course there's the Matson one that's blocked by William Pacho at the end, but that's really the only one. But Donnarumma does his best work around those two goals, doesn't he, when you think of the saves that he manages to make, and particularly that one from Asensio after he's come on.
Yeah, I think the Asensio one was really key. I think there's so much to sort of unpack just in that opportunity. Asensio up against his parent club, on loan with Villa, obviously got off to a great start.
Seemed inevitable, really.
Yeah, form suffered a little bit of late, and obviously didn't have a great weekend, missing 2 penalties in the same game. But it did feel like that was his moment to step up, and obviously didn't manage to put it in. Donnarumma does well, and suddenly PSG are riding out the storm. But I think it says a lot also for the way that Villa acquitted themselves for this second half, that PSG were playing for time in the final 10 minutes. So is there any team in Europe this season that has made PSG play for time? I think it's definitely a first that I've seen this season. And
so when you cancel, hold it in the corner, won't they?
Exactly. There's not many times that I've seen them, over the years doing that. So I think that's, certainly something that's to Villa's credit as well.
It's funny, the last thing I said to someone I was talking to at half time, I was talking to Danny Jameson from TNT, and we were saying, PSG are on top of it. But the thing about them, and we've seen it time and time again in this season's Champions League, they don't panic. But they were having a full-on panic, weren't they? I mean, is there a feeling that because they got through it, this has to be their year in the Champions League? Because they've seemed so composed over the last couple of months. After, it has to be said, you can go through various states in the Champions League. They had a very poor start to the campaign, 3 goals in the first 5. And since then, they've looked the best team in the competition. But they're in proper trouble here.
Yeah, they were. I think there was an opening for sort of their bad old ways to come back.
Yeah.
A lot of people started to whisper, we're about to see the next remontada. And, obviously we know that it didn't come to pass. But, it was a brief flirtation with, the hearts that has haunted PSG. But the one thing that would really impressed me about PSG coming into this game was a lot of the fan base went back to their old ways of being very complacent, thinking that the tie was already done.
Right.
And obviously the first 2 goals in the game here didn't help that either. But I think the one thing that I would really like to single out and really praise in all of this, certainly from the PSG side of things, is I think Luis Enrique managed his players extremely well, because there was that threat, especially once Villa started to get themselves back in the game with that goal in the first half, and then obviously the glut of goals in the second half. Started to hear the whispers of, is this going to be another remontada? He didn't allow his players to approach the game with the same level of complacency as Ian Hamers did. I was actually quite surprised that the fans hadn't learned from their previous lessons, previous brushes with disaster, and so many of them are actually coming into this and assuming that the job was already done. And I think many of them will be breathing huge sighs of relief, because obviously they're run much closer than many expected them to. And I think that is really to Luis Enrique's credit, but also to the credit of this group of players now, because they've shown that they're made of different stuff. Yes, they took a bit of a beating from Villa, and it's a fantastic fight back, one that will be talked about for many years in Villa quarters, but also on the PSG side of things, to have come out the other side but still be in a Champions League semi-final despite being on the receiving end of that, and having also played so well in the first leg and at times in the second leg as well, because they were brilliant on a counter-attack. It's I think that's something that's really heartening for this PSG, and shows that there has been a significant change over the last couple of years since Luis Enrique came in.
And as you say, 4th Champions League semi-final in 6 seasons. Can I just talk about Gigi Donnarumma for a second? Because I know everyone's not sold on him. I'm not really sold on him, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I think a Luis Enrique team ideally needs a goalkeeper who's a bit better with his feet. But really, and this is one of my favourite sporting analogies here, so bear with me. Today, he was Ricky Ponting in 2005 at Old Trafford. All he has to do is battle day. There's nothing to think about. He just has to do him. And when it comes to making saves that 98% of goalkeepers can't make, that is what Donnarumma is. And he had one of those games where you're like, maybe he is the real deal after all.
Yeah, and it is tempting as well. After you see PSG in these big games, yes, Donnarumma has had a handful of stars in big European matches, but he's also come up really big for PSG in a handful of those European games as well. And I think you look at the consistency that he's playing with and performing with at this moment in time in the Champions League, and he's putting in some really crucial efforts. Liverpool away, now here as well. And I think that's really going to be encouraging for him, but also for Luis Enrique, who has had to stand by him at times when it's been quite difficult to defend him. And you look at what happened just a couple of months ago, Arsenal away in the Ligue phase, he makes arguably 2 mistakes or 1.5 mistakes.
End of the PSG game, end of the Liverpool game, could have saved that Harvey Elliott goal, you could argue.
Yeah, but then he redeemed himself in the penalty shoot.
Yeah.
Like you said, when he does redeem himself or force you to sort of rethink your stance on him, because like you, I'm not entirely convinced, of the aura that sometimes surrounds him. And obviously I know that he's a national treasure for his role in Euro success with Ixby a couple of years ago, but he does, when you take out the sort of technical elements as you rightly pointed out, Luis Enrique does, require of his goalkeepers. He is an extremely good shot stopper, and I think that's why this debate infuriates so many people, because in many traditional ways of measuring how good a goalkeeper is, he's brilliant. But in many ways of measuring how good a goalkeeper is in a modern sense, I'm not going to say he's terrible. He's lacking in a number of areas. So it is this conundrum. But in those big games, when you need a strong hand to get to the ball, Donnarumma is among the best and among the few that you would really sort of bet your house on to keep a shot out.
Before we say goodnight from Villa Park, because we're going to need to lie down in a darkened room at some point. It's been so intense. I want to talk about Villa, and I want to talk about the Premier League teams in the Champions League. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee that Manchester City will make it this season. Who knows? Maybe we'll be seeing them in the UEFA Conference League next season. It really is a possibility. But Villa, like I said, I think they'll be back, especially as top 5, not top 4 qualify. I think they've got a brilliant chance. You look at Newcastle, who at the time of recording, they could go into 3rd place if they were to win tomorrow night or against Crystal Palace, a game that I'll be going to. They're in the mix as well. That would be So we're talking about a second successive season in the Champions League after a big absence. We're talking about 2 seasons out of 3 that Newcastle United are in the Champions League. Is there a bit of a change about in the hierarchy and the power structure in the Champions League?
I definitely think that it is a moment now where there is potentially a changing of the guard. I think one of the major factors in that is you've got some of the more familiar names who have represented English football in European competition in the last couple of years struggling at the moment, the likes of Manchester United, the likes of Tottenham Hotspur, and you've got the likes of Newcastle and Villa, who have put together really strong squads in the last couple of years, got very capable managers, and suddenly are extremely competitive, not only domestically but also on the continents as well. And I think it's really into the credits of managers like Unai Emery and Eddie Howe, that they've managed to turn this into a situation now where it is possible for not just to be sort of like one magical season experience. And it does kind of fit. It also encourages some of those hopefuls at the moment. You look at the likes of Nottingham Forest, look at the likes of Bournemouth. They all kind of follow the same example. Villa followed on from Newcastle, and possibly one of Forest or Bournemouth might follow on from Villa. So I do think that it is a moment at this right now in Premier League history where some of the more enterprising folks who are going about things a bit of a different way, and not looking to sort of fall back on former glories, who could potentially be the future of English football in the European scene.
Thanks so much for joining us, as always, on the OTC YouTube channel. JJ will be joining me and Dotun Adebayo on Thursday for the podcast. If you're not on that, do subscribe on your podcast feed now. Every Friday as well, we have Ask OTC, where we answer your questions. Get them to us on socials or below the line here. It's good night from Birmingham.